Greetings, friends. This is a short little video about a particular kind of statistic that you see often in educational research called effect size. And for this particular use of effect size, we are going to revisit the topic of standard deviation. Effect size is used in two instances. One, to show the differences between groups. The other, to show the strengths of relationship between two variables. We want to use effect size to talk about the differences between two groups in this instance. And for our purposes, we just need to revisit the idea of standard deviation. We will cover this previously in the course. But a standard deviation is the distribution of data around the average or mean score. What we normally say when we talk about standard deviations is that you have a group of numbers that are equally distributed along a distribution. Here's the average or mean score. The Greek letter mu stands, for our purposes, stands for mean. The one that looks like an S with a line over it is this Greek letter sigma. One sigma is one standard deviation. And for our purposes, to take a look at this, with one standard deviation means that it captures 34%, approximately 34% of the individuals above the mean and 34% of the individuals below the mean. If you were to add all of the numbers of people that are represented by these standard deviations below the mean, you add them all up together, you would say that if a person's score was right here at one standard deviation above the mean, it means that they scored better than about 84% of the class, and about 16% of the class scored higher than they did. So what we want to do is take a look at standard deviation and show how it's used to describe the results of educational research. So let's say that there was a particular test that was given, and to meet the standards on that test, you had to get a score of 70. Well, in this particular group, let's, for example, say that this group did average a score of 70 and the standard deviation was 10, which means if you go back to our slide here, maybe this would be better, that this would be in 70 and this would be 80, this would be 90, 100. 34% of the individuals scored one standard deviation above the mean, 34% below scored one standard deviation. You would go all the way back to here and add up all of these numbers here. 84% in total scored below one standard deviation above, and about 16% scored above. So let's just say, for example, that there was this enhancement program, and it was shown through various studies that it increased the scores of a population group by one standard deviation. What would that mean? So let's just take this sample again and this example again and say that here's the passing grade and the average score was 70 and standard deviation was 10. So again, here's a score of 80 and 34% of the individuals scored at that one standard deviation above the mean, another 14% for 2, and so on and so forth. So what happens then if you use this intervention? And now watch this new bell curve. Here's the bell curve of the individuals before the intervention. Here's the bell curve of the test scores of individuals after the assessment. There was a passing score of 70, but now look what percentage of the population now is above this mean score, which is the passing score. It's 84%. So before, when 50% were below and 50% above, now with this new intervention raising test scores by one standard deviation, you have a greater number of individuals, a greater number of students now who are above the old mean, which was the old average score. Now, John Marzano is a rather well-known educational researcher. You probably will have, if not read, at least seen some of his work. and he's famous for researching these 9 instructional strategies. And what he has done is he's evaluated, by using the research out there, the relative effect size, or how much improvement you can see with these various instructional strategies. And for Marzano, the effect size is related to the standard deviation distribution. So an effect size of 1 is 1 standard deviation. So if you instituted a program where you taught students how to summarize and take notes, you can expect that group of students to increase their test scores, or the group to increase its average test scores by one standard deviation, which means that whereas 50%, let's say in an average class, 50% would pass, 50% didn't, now 84% would pass and 16% would not. So there's a lot that we can do with all of this. If this was an advanced stats course, we might spend some time thinking about it, and I have some examples of how to actually go and drill down into the detail of that. We're not interested for our purposes in doing that. All I want you to do is to be able to understand and interpret what this effect size is when you read educational research. So here's some other examples from Marzano, the importance of feedback. These are the studies here. Here's the average effect size from that study, and so forth. So for our purposes and for the assignment that we're going to be doing with this, all you need to know is what effect size means. And that effect size means is tied to standard deviation, and it means that percentage of a standard deviation that a particular kind of a intervention will create.